Before we begin, a thought. If everything in life is selfish, then what happens to sacrifice, to love, to God? Today, Dr. Moustache claims that everything is selfish, giving, loving, even dying for others. Even Jesus. This is dangerous territory, but fascinating. Dr. Moustache, take us in.
Basically, what's the next step? Let's say you listen to this and you start agreeing that giving to the poor is a selfish act. Harming someone is a selfish act. Raising one's kids is selfish. Everything is selfish. Once you start truly understanding this and you start living with that practical knowledge, it changes how your brain works. It changes how your brain is wired. When you know the truth, mental blocks are lifted. You become more fluid, even your neural pathways change. But then comes the problem. You need to know how to navigate a world where there's a clear division between the actual truth and what society promotes as holy, but is actually false. So how can you live in such an environment?
Are there options?
One option is to uphold the truth completely. Act selfishly all the time, without caring what society says. But that could lead to isolation, could lead to failure in terms of finances, in terms of social life, in terms of family life. The other option is to be fluid, not hypocritical, but understanding the limits of your existence. You live in a society. You can't just escape to the mountains and live completely isolated without sacrificing a practical, healthy quality of life.
So, you have to play within the rules of the simulation.
Exactly. That's a personal choice. But here's what I believe. You can know the truth, appreciate it, and use it to avoid punishing yourself unnecessarily. Because society doesn't just control us with external authorities. It implants a self-imposed figure of authority inside our minds. And it does that through the false narrative of selflessness. When you believe selflessness is good, you become your own slave master internally. That's when you start giving away your wealth, leaving everything behind to become an enlightened master, following religious teachings that encourage extreme selflessness. But selfishness is never encouraged, and that's what makes it powerful.
But Dr. Moustache, if we accept that everything is selfish, won't that make us worse? Won't that make us cold, disconnected, cruel?
Not at all. In reality, knowing that we are fundamentally selfish can actually make us more empathetic, more connected to others, more charitable, more human. Because here's what happens. You'll start seeing yourself in everyone else, even those who are labeled selfish, even criminals, even people you hate. You will understand that their actions are just reflections of their immaturity or their lack of awareness, and you will have a deeper connection with them.
That's unexpected.
It gets better. When you embrace your own selfishness, without shame, without guilt, you can give more, you can love more, you can share freely, without internal conflict. Not because you want to appear holy, but because you want to. Naturally, knowing the truth doesn't make you less compassionate. It makes you more connected to humanity. It makes your charity pure, not poisoned by false expectations, not driven by guilt or lies, but flowing naturally from a solid, secure, selfish foundation.
So embracing selfishness actually creates true generosity.
Exactly. And it removes punishment. You stop punishing yourself for your nature. You stop believing that your instinct is bad. Selfishness is not bad. It is natural.
But if this is true, then doesn't that mean that the greatest way to control people is to convince them their nature is evil?
Exactly. And that is what religions, societies, and systems have done forever. Convince you that what you are is bad. Convince you that you must sacrifice endlessly. Convince you that you must act like Jesus. And that brings us to the greatest example of all.
Jesus Christ. Is his sacrifice unselfish too?
Yes, even the sacrifice of Jesus Christ is selfish at its core. And I know this sounds shocking to most people, but let me explain. The root of selfishness and self-preservation is the same fuel. It's the same vector. It's the same instinct. Acting selfishly is not a human choice. It's not a luxury. It's not like preferring Pepsi over Coca-Cola. It's instinctive. It's like breathing.
Child, Philippians 2:9 says, "Therefore God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name." Christ's death was not defeat. It was elevation. He trades earthly pain for eternal dominion. That is not selflessness. That is perfect investment.
But intention matters, doesn't it? Jesus says in Luke 22:42, "Not my will, but thine be done." Isn't that obedience?
Or proof of supreme alignment with reward. Matthew 28:18 says, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me." This is not surrender. This is coronation.
And this applies not only to Jesus, it applies to all actions. Even the mother feeding her child feels joy. Even the stranger saving another gains internal peace. Nobody acts without gain. Nobody acts in pure vacuum. It does not exist.
But what about suicide? What about self-harm? Isn't that proof that selfishness isn't universal?
In fact, that's the best proof that selfishness is universal. Because suicide, self-harm, is a corrupted reflection of the same self-preservation instinct. It's a copying error. It's like a child thinking they can fly and jumping out of a window. Ignorance leads to harm. But the original fuel was still the same. Nobody hates themselves unless they have an idealized image of themselves they believe they are failing to reach. The source of their hatred is actually love. A love for their own ideal, a desire to escape pain, a desire to stop suffering. Even suicide is selfish. It seeks relief. It seeks escape. It is still self-service, misunderstood.
Every action remains within the orbit of the self. Always.
Dr. Moustache, if selfishness is universal, if it fuels every action, then what happens to kindness? What happens to selflessness?
Understanding that selfishness is the human baseline nature, the pulse of the human psyche, allows us to see something profound. Selfishness is not on a continuum. It's not a scale. It's not something that fluctuates between 10% or 90%. It is a binary, a 1 and 0 system, where the 0 does not exist. And when you truly realize this, when you truly internalize that we are all selfish, not differently, not more or less, but exactly the same, you realize we are one, we are the same. And paradoxically, this makes us behave, or at least have the predisposition to behave, with more regard to others, with clarity, with compassion, because selflessness becomes a luxury that we indulge in, that we enjoy, that we might even routinely practice, but only when we stay connected with the thin, vital thread that originates from the core initiative, which is selfishness.
Indeed, man never escapes the orbit of the self, but it is in orbiting truthfully that he achieves grace.
Perhaps the tragedy of humanity is not that we are selfish, but that we are ashamed of it.
For what is worse, to act selfishly openly, or to act selfishly while pretending to be pure? Anyways, my selfish brothers and sisters, feed your mind and click like, subscribe, maybe even share this video, not for me, for you.